This hourly segment is brought to you by the IRS Radio Hour with Stephen Leahy. Every Sunday afternoon at 5 on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're coming to you live from Joe Cotton Ford and Carroll Stream, kicking off our Freedom Summit ticket sales this morning. That's November 2nd at the Westin in Itasca. We've got a all-star lineup, a lot of intellectual heavyweights as per usual.
With Michelle Malkin, Sean Hannity's going to be here, Lara Logan, Sebastian Gorka, Molly Hemingway, and Carrie Severino, Rusty Reno, just to name a few. Ed Morrissey is going to be there. He's a good friend of the program. And Will Chamberlain, not Wilt Chamberlain, of Human Events. And if you want to come down here to Joe Cotton Ford, we're here until 9 a.m. and we're giving away a free pair of tickets. And also, if you can't make it down here, go to freedomsummitchicago.com to get your tickets. This event always sells out. It's going to be a great night. Freedomsummitchicago.com. Again, it's November 2nd, Saturday, at the Chicago Westin Northwest in Itasca.
And over the weekend, our friend, former ICE director, acting ICE director Tom Homan, was on to discuss this Google petition. Have you seen the Google petition?
Yeah.
As you would expect, Google, they don't want Google doing business with the Department of Defense, with the Pentagon. They don't want Google doing business with ICE or Customs and Border Patrol or anything associated with enforcement of immigration laws. And Tom Homan was asked to react. And he's never shy to do so. But this is a great riff on informing the public what ICE actually does and who ICE actually is after they've been smeared by the likes of AOC with impunity as Nazi stormtroopers lording over concentration camps.
First of all, the only thing I tell them is get out of the building. Fire them. I don't know any employees who want to see their company lose, millions of contracts with the federal government. Look, they're supposed to be techie smart, this younger generation, but these people are morons because they haven't studied the issue. Study the issue, stop the false, and find out what ICE actually does. Do you know 9 out of 10 people that ICE arrests are criminals, convicted criminals, or are pending criminal charges against a United States citizen? Do you know that ICE took enough opioids off the street last year that kill every man, woman, and child in this country twice? Do you know ICE have saved thousands of children from child predators? Do you know ICE has saved hundreds of women from sex trafficking? Do you know ICE arrested 137,000 criminals, public safety threats off your streets to make your streets safer? And as far as Nazis, let me educate you on that too. ICE actually has an entire division that investigates and removes human rights violators. During my 34 years with ICE, we actually arrested and removed hundreds of Nazi war criminals to go back and stand trial. Yeah. ICE arrests human rights violators every year, hundreds, and sends them back to their homeland to face charges. So ICE is an exact opposite operational mode. We attack human violators, and we remove them and have them deported, and so they can face their consequences back in their homeland.
For more on this topic, and we'll take a little jaunt around the globe with him as well, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I was with Tom just the other day. We did an event in Austin. He's an old friend.
And what do you so how do you react to what he had to say, not just informing the Google petitioners, but informing the larger debate, since ICE has been so caricatured by the left, and with amplification by the D.C. press corps, of course?
Well, as horrific as it is to hear a legitimate law enforcement agency be demonized that way, and even one of the things he didn't talk about is if you actually look at their statistics, they have some of the best statistics in terms of their performance or legitimacy in any other federal agency. So, for example, if you're held in custody in New York City, you're 18 times more likely to die than if you're held in custody by ICE. Right? So, if you're an official who's elected in New York, you might be more concerned about the standards of detention in New York City facilities than you are in ICE facilities. And I have met many of these men and women, and they do a whole range of things. They protect us from counterfeit merchandise. They take drugs off the street. They take criminals out of the country. And I guess what's stunning is not so much that these claims are made, but that they're made by people who are actually supposedly legitimate government elected officials.
Well, what did you think?
And they make them with
sorry.
impunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you think? Beto O'Rourke restarted his campaign yet again, returning to the presidential trail over the weekend, but he focused on communities that he believes are under attack by Trump. He visited people in Mississippi where the ICE raid took place. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this gets to the core of the issue about detention and removal, which is, just like any other law, if there is no enforcement mechanism, the law has no credibility. We give soccer moms speeding tickets. We arrest really nice people from our church because they cheat on their taxes. Arresting people who have broken a law and then having to pay the consequences for that. That's part of the rule of law. And if you don't do that, you've actually done the opposite. You privilege certain people in a society above other people in a society. So even though it says, well, we're being mean here, it just doesn't work. So the one that got me the most kind of agitated was the constant pictures of the little girl crying that her dad had been arrested.
Oh, yeah.
And my response to that was, look, I've been watching law enforcement for decades. My dad was a cop. I mean, a law enforcement arrests people. Sometimes those people have children. Part of the job is ensuring the safety of the child. It involves child services, law enforcement, local communities, sometimes NGOs, families. But addressing their issues and needs, that's just part of the job.
I wanted to get your take on Hong Kong with the largest protest yet over the weekend. Some estimates of 1.7 million people turned out. You had a good write-up in FoxNews.com on the topic suggesting that one of the problems is that Hong Kong is just not as important to the Chinese economy as it once was. But that shouldn't mean that Hong Kong and watching people try to revolt for their freedom against Chinese communists is something that we should ignore or pay short shrift to.
Well, I think definitely one of the lessons learned there is that China doesn't care about its own people, regardless of what you think of the current situation. The people of Hong Kong are citizens of China, and China doesn't care about them, and that's 7 million people that essentially the government could care less about. And I think that's a pretty stunning indictment for the rest of the world to see. You kind of wonder where the off ramp is here. I mean, I am in the camp that there's really no reason for the Chinese to intervene. The Hong Kong police can handle this. They're happy to see that Hong Kong look unstable and have that business go elsewhere. But you do have to wonder at some point where's the off ramp for Hong Kong? And I think that's the big question mark that nobody has.
Well, right, but then and what should American policy be, even rhetorically, with respect to those people protesting in Hong Kong and Eye Patch Girl and the people who've been beaten and otherwise injured by police for protesting?
Well, I think the number one thing really for the U.S. to do is to point to this is emblematic of the behavior of the Chinese government. They have a long list of broken promises, and they are not respecting the rights and needs of their own people. I think that's the number one lesson we all take away from it. Beyond that, I think the U.S. has very limited capacity to actually influence the situation, other than saying the world is watching, and the United States will hold you accountable. We just published a piece on this on the Heritage website, heritage.org. They said, look, if Hong Kong actually intervenes militarily, there's a whole list of the things that the United States would appropriately do in response to that. Those are things that are not going to make China happy, and China would pay a price. And I think the free world would make China pay a price for military intervening. I do believe that.
Well, do you think the Hong Kong protests are going to complicate negotiations, though, especially with the tariff talks?
I don't think so, because I think they're dead.
Oh,
that's good. Well, that's encouraging. Yeah, no, right. Well, though that's not the note that Larry Kudlow struck over the weekend. No. He was suggesting that talks are ongoing, positioning is ongoing, progress is hopefully imminent.
Yeah, well, first of all, I do think if Hong Kong intervened militarily, then talks would be stone dead. But I'm just not seeing from the Chinese side a need to cut a deal now. No, maybe they will cut a deal. I don't know. To me, I get less and less enamored with the deal. The deal seems to be something like this golden egg that hanging out there that the markets will just joyously rapture over. But I think the pushing back was important to reset the relationship. But I don't think the deal is an endpoint. I mean, even if they had some kind of deal, the Chinese would immediately look for ways to walk around it or renege it and walk off it. And it's just the beginning, I think, of the struggle between the two economies, figuring out their way in the world. So to me, a deal is not some kind of magic solution, even though the administration would say that, Chinese might say that, but they both know that that's not true.
Right, it's not true, but it has important psychic value and it has important economic value, at least in the short term, if it actually resulted in lowering tariffs, reducing taxes.
I do get a sense on the U.S. side that they've kind of crossed an economic Rubicon there, and they don't think they need the trade deal to get reelected. There's other ways lots of things they can do to make sure the economy keeps humming along. And the Chinese, I do think, are hurting more than the U.S. So on balance, if the U.S. economy remains strong, the Chinese are suffering. I think the administration is happy to wait till after 2020 to do a trade deal. I think from the Chinese perspective, they said, well, maybe Trump will get reelected, and we'll get a new president who will try to push this through. So we'll see.
Maybe we could buy Hong Kong instead of Greenland.
There you go.
Price might be a little higher.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah. But perhaps we could deal, and perhaps if
and we have a good paper on Greenland too, heritage.org.
Yeah. What if we
the only think tank in America that actually had an analyst go to Greenland. I'm the only person that's actually had people on the ground in Greenland. So.
And
what do the people say?
Have you priced it out?
No, but now I'm thinking, we did this. We've been working on Greenland for a couple of years now, but now I think people are going to think like maybe we're part of the CIA or something. That they sent us over there to scout it out.
Well, what if we did a straight up trade? We did Illinois and Portland for Hong Kong.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the Danes would do with Portland.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Portland and violence from ignorant extremist groups of all sorts, we saw violence from the anti-fascists in Portland over the weekend. We had three arrests of potential mass shooters that were making threats online, and there was a lot of sort of noise on cable channels about Trump tweeting about Antifa and considering them a domestic terrorist group, and there's no such designation, and so on and so forth. The designation is not important. What's important is law enforcement scrutiny. And give us your sense of federal law enforcement scrutiny on these extremist groups like Antifa, as well as extremist one-offs like these arrests that were made.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's definitely something that the federal government's going to have to pay more attention to. Not that they don't; they actually have task forces that do this. Matter of fact, I was talking to folks in the FBI and CIA the other day, and the notion that somehow that they've just neglected these groups and they aren't looking at them for years is just something it's just not true. They have been. I think they'll publicly have to demonstrate that they're doing that more, just because there's so much attention on it. But and as a historian, I just reflect on this. Thinking back, the contrast between what's going on now and 1968. In 1968. All of America was really angry. It just feels to me, anyway, that now it's like most of America is really disconnected from this intense anger, and it's like we're all watching a national reality TV show, but we're not really moved by it. I don't get the sense that all of America is caught up in this extreme anger that seems focused on the political scene, and so there's the Washington bubble, and then there are these people that kind of take that anger into the countryside, and they do something that looks like performance art, except it turns to violence and people get hurt. But it's not really connected to the rest of it. I'm in Waco, Texas, and you walk around town, and nobody's angry about anything. They're all just wearing Chip and Roy T-shirts.
Yeah, sure. Well, sure, right, sure. You got meandering around the campus at Baylor and just enjoying yourselves. Yeah. No, I think it's actually a good point. The disconnect between the America that's portrayed on cable news and then the
Real
lives that
America.
most Americans actually lead, where there is no, I'm not involved in any race war. I don't have any conflict when I go to the coffee shop or to go to my job. I mean, so much of this seems to be, sort of purposely manufactured.
And I think that's particular. I'm glad you brought up, university campuses, because that actually seems to be particularly true on university campuses, which are, generally you're not seeing student strikes. You're not seeing, they're not, we're in like in '68 when they were kind of the hotbeds of this. It's not. It is, people who in many cases are imported into communities that do this, and it doesn't seem like it's rooted in the community itself, except maybe in Portland, where it's almost become institutionalized.
Well, sure. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of shocking and disturbing. But again, nobody looks at Portland and says, well, there is little America right there, right? That's the community that's speaking for the rest of us. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think this kind of thing will continue through next year, but people are going to get hurt, and I think that's the sad part, right? I mean, essentially what we have is a small, agitated political class who are using other human beings as kind of props, and in the process of that, they're shooting them, blowing them up, and beating them with fists, and it's just not who we are as a country. I don't think it's and it's going to move the American electorate.